It was Emma's first year at college, and she was excited to start her new life on campus. She had been assigned to a small, older dorm building known for its quaint charm and historical significance. Emma didn't mind the creaky floors and slightly outdated facilities, she was just happy to be starting her journey. Emma's roommate, Sarah, was supposed to arrive the same day, but by evening, Sarah still hadn't shown up. Emma unpacked her things and settled in, figuring that Sarah might have been delayed. She decided to go to bed early, hoping to meet her roommate the next day. Around midnight, Emma was awoken by the sound of someone moving around in the room. She opened her eyes to see a shadowy figure standing by Sarah's bed, unpacking. Relieved that her roommate had finally arrived, Emma mumbled a sleepy greeting and went back to sleep. The next morning, Emma woke up to an empty room. Sarah's bed was untouched, and there were no signs of anyone else having been there. Emma shrugged it off, thinking she had been dreaming, and went about her day. That night, the same thing happened. Emma heard movement and saw the shadowy figure again, this time seemingly getting ready for bed. She was too tired to question it and fell back asleep. This pattern continued for several nights. Emma would see the figure at night, but the room would be empty by morning. Growing increasingly uneasy, Emma mentioned the strange occurrences to her RA. The RA's face grew serious. She explained that years ago, a student named Sarah had lived in that very room. Sarah had mysteriously disappeared one night, and her case remained unsolved. Since then, several students had reported similar experiences, but the incidents were dismissed as urban legends or stress-induced hallucinations. Determined to find out what was happening, Emma set up a camera to record overnight. The next day, she reviewed the footage with a sense of dread. There, captured on video, was the shadowy figure moving around the room, but it never fully materialized. It was as if it was caught between two worlds. Emma decided she couldn't stay in the room any longer. She requested a room change and moved out as soon as she could. The experience left her shaken, and she often wondered if the spirit of the missing Sarah was still trying to live out her college days, forever trapped in that old dorm room. It was a rainy October evening when Josh moved into the old, ivy-covered dormitory. The building had stood on campus for over a century, and its history was filled with both fond memories and eerie tales. Josh didn't pay much attention to the rumors, he was more focused on settling in and starting his freshman year. On his second night, Josh was studying for an upcoming test when he heard a faint whisper. At first, he thought it was coming from outside, but as the rain intensified, he realized the whispers were coming from within the walls. He pressed his ear to the cool, damp plaster and distinctly heard a voice muttering his name. Chills ran down his spine, but he shrugged it off as his imagination playing tricks on him. Over the next few days, the whispers grew louder and more frequent. Sometimes, they sounded like frantic conversations, other times, like cries for help. Josh couldn't make out the words, but the tone was always urgent, desperate. He started losing sleep, his dreams haunted by shadowy figures and disembodied voices. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Josh talked to his neighbors, but no one else seemed to hear the voices. They suggested he was just stressed or that the old pipes were making noise. Unsatisfied with these explanations, Josh began to research the history of the dormitory. He discovered that the building had been used as a hospital during the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918. Many of the rooms, including his, had been makeshift wards where countless patients had succumbed to the illness. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that the whispers were the voices of those who had died there, trapped in the walls of the building. One particularly stormy night, the whispers reached a fever pitch. Josh felt a sudden compulsion to follow the voices, which led into a small, hidden door in the basement. He forced it open and found himself in a dark, musty room filled with old hospital beds and medical equipment covered in dust. The air was thick with an overwhelming sense of sorrow and despair. In the center of the room was an old journal. As Josh flipped through its pages, he realized it was a doctor's diary detailing the horrific conditions and the overwhelming number of deaths that had occurred. The final entry was a chilling plea for forgiveness, as the doctor had sealed the bodies of the patients within the walls to prevent the spread of the disease. Josh fled the room, the whispers now a cacophony of wails and screams. He couldn't stay in the dormitory any longer. The next morning, he packed his things and moved out, leaving the haunted history behind. The whispers ceased, but the memories of that terrifying experience stayed with him forever. He couldn't shake the feeling that the souls of those who had died there were still trapped, forever calling out from the whispering walls. Sophomore year had just begun, and Megan was thrilled to be moving into a historic house off campus with her best friends. The house, known as Maplewood Manor, was over 100 years old and had a reputation for being charmingly spooky. The rent was cheap, and the location was perfect, so the friends ignored the whispers about its haunted past. The house had a large, unused attic that the landlord had warned them not to enter due to its unsafe floorboards. Naturally, this made the attic all the more intriguing. One evening, while exploring the house, Megan and her friends found the attic door slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to take a look. As they climbed the narrow staircase, the air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over them. The attic was filled with old furniture, dusty trunks, and cobwebs. But what caught their attention were the strange shadows that seemed to dance on the walls, even though there was no light source. Ignoring their growing fear, they began to rummage through the trunks and old furniture. They found an old journal belonging to a girl named Clara, who had lived in the house during the 1920s. Clara's entries spoke of a happy life until one day, they abruptly changed tone. She wrote about seeing dark, shadowy figures in the attic that seemed to be watching her, following her. The last entry was a desperate plea for help, followed by pages of frantic, illegible scribbles. That night, Megan couldn't sleep. She kept hearing faint footsteps and whispers, but every time she checked, the house was silent. The next day, the friends decided to do more research on Maplewood Manor. They discovered that Clara had mysteriously disappeared one night, and no trace of her was ever found. Rumors had spread that her spirit haunted the attic, tormented by the shadows she wrote about. Megan's dreams became nightmares filled with dark, faceless figures. One night, she woke up to find a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. It didn't move or make a sound, but its presence was suffocating. She closed her eyes tightly, hoping it would go away. When she opened them, it was gone, but she felt a lingering dread. The friends decided to perform a cleansing ritual in the attic, hoping to rid the house of its sinister presence. As they chanted and burned sage, the shadows seemed to grow angrier, swirling around them more aggressively. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew through the attic, extinguishing their candles and plunging them into darkness. Panicked, they fled the attic, slamming the door behind them. They decided to never go back up there again. But the shadows didn't stay confined to the attic. Over the next few weeks, they started appearing in the main parts of the house. Megan saw them out of the corner of her eye, always just beyond her vision. Unable to bear it any longer, the friends moved out of Maplewood Manor, leaving behind the eerie shadows and the haunting presence of Clara. Megan couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows had followed her, always lurking just out of sight, a constant reminder of the chilling experience at the old house.